Are you a Scrum Master who is practicing Scrum but is unable to identify the anti patterns in your Scrum implementation? Would you like to understand and learn about the anti patterns of Scrum? Then today's episode is for you. In this episode, we are going to have a conversation about anti patterns of Scrum with our guest, Stefan Wolfers. Stefan is a professional Scrum trainer, PhD, writer, and debutant author of his upcoming book, Scrum Anti Patterns Guide. Stefan's extensive 2 decade journey in software development, coupled with his role as a professional Scrum trainer, highlights his profound expertise in agile transitions. His hands-on coaching approach helps organizations in embracing agile product practices, expanding from startups to large enterprises. Stefan's dedication to solving customer issues while upholding sustainability underscores his commitment. His book on Scrum Anti Patterns demonstrates his passion for Agile and Scrum, promising valuable insights for practitioners when it releases in early 2024. So, without much ado, let's welcome Stefan.
Hello, Stephen. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you on our show. And we are really excited to have a conversation with you regarding your book. And first of all, congratulations for your book.
Well, thanks of all. First of all, thanks for having me, and thank you. The book is still not in the stores. So a lot can happen, but I'm getting more optimistic by the day, so to speak. So apparently, it seems to be available by the end of January next year. We'll see.
Wow, excited for your book, and obviously, the topic itself is so catchy, right? And that's what most of the Scrum practitioners would love to read or learn, because there are many things that a Scrum guide doesn't cover. So I think that would be an amazing read already, I would say. And as I mentioned, today we would want to have a conversation on your book, The Anti Patterns of Scrum. So to begin with, would like to understand the maybe the purpose behind writing this book. So I wanted to know what is the book Scrum Anti Patterns Guide and what is its purpose?
There's an interesting learning principle. It's called inversion. So you change the perspective, and by changing the perspective, you get better insights and a better understanding. So it's you can apply it in a lot of different fields. For example, in our industry, creating products, it would be something along the line of pre-mortems. So instead of thinking about how can we turn this into a success, we think about, okay, how can we turn this into a complete mess? And then you figure out, okay, how did we manage to get there? And by identifying, okay, what hypothetically went wrong and turned this into a mess, you actually can think about, maybe we should avoid those in the future. It's the same principle behind TRIZ, deliberating structure, and I find it really, really helpful. So it helps me to understand and identify patterns. It's a bit like Charlie Munger used to say. I mean, you become a decent investor by just avoiding the typical traps and errors a lot of other people make. So don't try to excel at stock picking, for example. Just avoid making the dumb mistakes. And this is a similar idea here. So I basically started writing about this, 7 years ago or something like that. I mean, you still find the anti-patterns guide PDF, the free PDF online. And those were just observations I made during a gig as a freelancing coach with my client. And it was for me a way to come to terms with the situation, because there wasn't that much I could do at the time. And I thought about them, okay, maybe there are a few other things. So why not collect all of those? So I started going through different artifacts and roles and events, and it grew over time. Yeah, so that's the genesis of the whole book.
Mhm. And good to know that maybe the inspiration or the thought process is picked up from obviously one of the best investors that we could ever have. I mean, Charlie Munger, when he talks about, keeping it simple, looking at what
Mm.
people are doing and taking inspiration, or looking at what mistakes those people are doing and avoiding those mistakes, or extracting, as you mentioned, picking up patterns from that. And I think that is what Charlie always used to, he used to propose, saying that whenever the investment strategies that we follow or we do, follow or look at what the simplest of the thing that we can do, and keep it simple, avoid those mistakes, and that should help you in your long-term journey. And that exactly, I think, what your anti-pattern is all about, looking at, or maybe Scrum, how it is implemented or how it is followed in the right way, and what are the things that one should be avoiding to ensure that the outcomes or the intention of why we are, scrumming, becomes more relatable, or becomes more valuable for teams adopting to it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So since we have, dived into the thought process or the idea of figuring out the anti-patterns within Scrum and all those things, so maybe we can start with the first, the core aspect of Scrum events, right? So what are the some common anti-patterns that you have seen with different teams and organizations that they follow Scrum while doing Scrum? What are some of the anti-patterns that they follow specifically in Scrum events? Would you like to talk about those?
There are so many, right? I mean, if you run a sprint planning, for example, it starts that the product owner brings the sprint goal, right, and the work, So you just they hand over a list of items and say, okay, this is what you're going to work on next sprint. That would be most valuable. Of course, this is not the idea how Scrum is supposed to work. I mean, the sprint planning is supposed to work in the fashion of the product owner brings the business objective, the team collectively identifies a suitable sprint goal aligned with that business objective. The developers commit to that collaboratively identified sprint goal and then are in turn allowed to pick the work that they deem necessary to accomplish it. This is something completely different. It's supposed to be to represent this checks and balances system. So I mean, you probably have already recognized, but Scrum is a rather egalitarian approach. No one has the authority to tell anyone else what to do, when to do, or how to do things. And this is not a bug; it's a feature, right? It's the easiest way to actually compromise this whole idea behind it. So you end up with some sort of project management with a thin veneer of whatever you would call it. I mean, it's not agility, but something else on top of it. So classic issue, right? What else do we have? Sprint planning, or during the sprint, there's important work to be done. Because one of your senior vice presidents has an urgent feature request, and the product owner just push it for it. Come on, do it. Doesn't matter. See to it that you can do this, and without disrespecting the autonomy the developers have over the sprint backlog, right? This is their home turf. They committed to the sprint goal. So maybe you don't start telling other people what to do, but maybe make a suggestion. Hi folks, what do you think? We have a very important inquiry from the management. Do you think there's a chance that we can just accommodate this during this current sprint? What would it take to make that happen? And then you probably start renegotiating the sprint goal or whatnot. I mean, so many. It's just about talk about this. Don't impose stuff. Daily Scrum, the classic is everyone's reporting to the Scrum Master. So looking at the Scrum Master, waiting to be allowed to talk, and this is not how it's supposed to be. Daily Scrum is actually a very simple event. It's all about inspecting progress towards sprint goal, and if necessary, change something to get back on track. Meaning accomplishing the sprint goal by the end of the sprint. This is it. It's not about problem solving. It's not about reporting. It's not about showing off that you're a good developer and you deserve your paycheck. This is not what it's about. It's about figuring out collectively: are we still on track? Are we? I mean, Scrum is a team sport. We do this because as a team we win and as a team we lose, and we want to win. And winning always means that we accomplish the sprint goal at the end of the sprint. This is the name of the game, and this is why we have this daily Scrum. It's nothing else. Okay, what else do we have? Sprint review. No one shows up. Instead, all your stakeholders insist on written reports. Give me a list of the items that you accomplish, and I'm fine with that. It's not the purpose of the whole exercise, It's not a demo of what you did in the past. It's not a justification that you deserve your paycheck. It's not showing off what awesome stuff you're working on, It's really about figuring out, as the extended team, so the Scrum team plus the stakeholders, whether we are making progress towards the product goal. And of course, on top of that, is our product goal still valid? Is this valuable? Should we continue pursuing it? Right? This is another question that we would like to get a bit more clarity about. And that's why the input of the stakeholders is so important. Or the stakeholders expect the sprint review to be some sort of stage gate, where they sign off. So you have to heard this dreadful idea of metered funding, to mitigate risk that you're running in the wrong direction, which means that all the time the team does not know whether it will exist after the meeting, maybe they pull the plug, and the funding and the back to benching and be reassigned to whatever. This is really not what it's all about. It's this idea of, okay, let's collectively figure out whether this all makes sense what we're doing here. Are we solving still our most urgent customer problem? And are we doing this in a way that we create not just value for the customers, but also contribution to our organization's sustainability? I mean, face it, we're not getting paid to practice Scrum, but solve our customer problems. And please do so in the way that we have a return on investment, right? And
Correct.
Retrospective. I mean, okay. Well, the good, bad action item retrospective, everything centered around the Confluence template, and then we're good to go. So 16 minutes and that's it, that's okay, this is a retrospective. I mean, is it really that boring? I mean, if it's that boring, why don't you stay away? Right? You sure have better things to do than hang out here for 15, 16 minutes and do something you're not interested in. I mean, this is bordering on being disrespectful to the rest of the team instead of explaining to them that you don't see any kind of value in what they're doing. That would be an honest answer, or you create minutes of the retrospective and immediately hand it over to your line managers or something like that. There's a moment for a joint retrospective with your line managers, for example, from time to time with your stakeholders. It is really working well. But there also needs to be a safe space where the team can, talk about the issues they're really concerned about among themselves, and they can be assured, or they are assured, that nothing is happening on their side. No one is snitching, no one is carrying the information to anyone else, that they're on the safe side. That would be the ideal way of actually handling this, but of course it requires a bit more work, right? And engagement and effort, and so it's a bit more exhausting, I guess.
Amazing. I'm already loving this conversation, and I'm really excited to know more what is written in the book, because as you rightly mentioned, I did glance through the PDF of it, honestly, and I found it so fascinating. I mean, this is typically what many of the Scrum practitioners would want to know. And since now we talked about or learned about, say, Scrum events anti-patterns, so we would also want to talk about the anti-patterns of artifacts in Scrum. So what we're trying to do is we want to kind of break this down into different elements of Scrum and what are the anti-patterns in each of them. So next, what we want to talk about is the anti-patterns in Scrum events and how can they be avoided.
Mm-hmm. So let's start at a meta level. So the idea of the anti-pattern guides is not to provide you with a checklist and say, okay, if I tick all the boxes, I'm good at this. This is not the case. It's more a kind of tool to better understand what might go wrong and apply that tool to your own situation and figure out the patterns in your organization. This is really about this, helping you to understand what kind of issues you have and then create patterns so that you better understand and come closer to the reason why they exist. So this is the other part. It's not just about describing what is going on and how it is supposed to be, but also my guess, okay, why are the things the way they are? There's always a reason for that. I mean, nothing falls from the sky, so to speak. There's always a reason why things are the way they are in any organization. Depending on the size of the organization, it's the market they're operating in, how large the organization is, the culture of the organization, the culture of the environment you're in. I mean, it's very different between running Scrum in an organization in India by comparison to the Netherlands. The Dutch people are very, very outspoken, so they're not beating around the bush, the further east you go, from my perspective, the more polite people become. Being polite also means that they're probably not that outspoken about the issues they observe. This could pose a challenge to retrospectives, for example. So this is another part. So I always try to understand, or I try to explain why things may be the way they are. What might be the motivation, or what might be the reason at an organizational level why things are the way they are. So you get a better understanding what you can actually do about them. So it's not a cookbook in the sense that, okay, if you face anti-pattern 162, you do A, B, and C. This is not how life works, but I can probably give you some understanding, okay, why things may be the way they are. And now if you mix into that your own understanding of the situation, then you probably come up with some ideas, okay, this is what I could do about it, right? So this is the basic concept of the whole book. Now, if we come to artifacts, I mean, so many stuff, right? So, product backlog, one of my favorite topics. When I'm sometimes tasked with helping teams, more kind of audit in the way that, okay, could you have a look at how they work and maybe come up with some suggestions? So one of the things I always do is have a close look at the product backlog, because I like to run some forensic analysis. What is in there? What was in there in the past? How do all these product backlog items look like? Is it obvious that people put thought into this? Were there some discussions happening? Was there some sort of negotiation that's maybe reflected on the whatever ticket system you use, right? Or is it maybe somewhere in the comments in the Git system that you use? So try to figure out how they were communicating about these issues. Is the refinement reflected? Or was someone throwing a requirement document over the fence at night and said, okay, you deliver this? It's 602 pages. I covered all the edge cases, and by the way, I already created the cucumber notation, so go for it, right? The problem, of course, always is that, like Karl Popper that mentioned that once, the Austrian philosopher, you cannot communicate in a way that you cannot be misunderstood. Let me butcher Mark Twain. I'm sorry for writing you a long letter. I didn't have the time to write you a short one. So the more you write, the more possibility is there that people misunderstand what you're talking about. I mean, we all have a different background. If the three of us reads a paragraph, rest assured we have a different understanding what's in there. Okay, except it's maybe mathematics or something like that, But So the usual description, what someone considers valuable and wants to have, for example, I'm sure we come up with different understanding that might be overlapping to a large extent, but it's not the same. And the same here. Product backlog items are always a token for discussion. Start with card conversation confirmation, the old pattern behind user stories, and you're basically starting to get the right direction. So as a product owner, I bring the idea why something might be valuable. I probably have data available, maybe analytics data, or maybe qualitative data from interviews or whatnot. So I can explain why I consider this to be something useful. And of course, I may have some ideas what I would like to have, but then on the other side, it's the job of the developers to actually challenge that belief, Hey, Stefan, this is really the best way that we can use our time here. And if so, does it have to be that large? Couldn't you scale it down a bit in the first version? I mean, what you're suggesting here is 3 times the work of what we could actually handle in the next sprint or something. And then you slowly but steadily get into the right mood. I mean, life is a negotiation. Why would Scrum be different?
Wow.
And this way you actually get a quite decent product backlog. And you have decent product backlog items, not just items where someone copy-pasted 100 pages from Word into the description field, completely useless. Or where you just have a headline and then nothing else, or you have entries, product backlog items that haven't been touched in 3 months. So what are they doing in there? Apparently they have no value. So why are you storing them in there? Why are you artificially increasing the noise level when you're actually looking for the signal? Why do you make it harder to work with that artifact deliberately? So I'm always puzzled by that. So that would be classic issues with product backlogs. And what are reasons for that? For example, someone believes that, okay, we need to keep track of all the ideas. Yes, you do, but not in the product backlog. Create another place for that. Just make sure that when you have a good idea that you believe in, that might be valuable, run a few experiments, validate your hypothesis. And if that is the case, and you believe we have a quite good understanding what we could do here and why it is valuable, then you may consider putting it in the product backlog for refinement and further processing, talking, negotiating, yada, yada, whatever you do in your team. Right, so that would be a normal way. People tend to use the product backlog for political reasons. So you have a nagging stakeholder, someone who's breathing down your neck because they want to have a certain product backlog item, feature, And to get them off your back, you said, yeah, I put it in the product backlog, and with the intention to let it rot there, but this is problematic. You increase the size of the product backlog. That makes it more challenging to handle. Again, you increase the noise level, and you're really not respecting your stakeholder. If you're not planning to do this, say no. You can do so without burning bridges. And as a product owner, it's also your job to learn this. So product backlog, sprint backlog. The most critical part always is that people often do not have sprint goals, right? Which, by the way, contrasts to the product backlog. The sprint goal is a part of the official product backlog, sprint backlog, and that is an issue, right? So if your team goal for the sprint is we like to work on 112, 117, 214, 269, and bugs B13 and B14, you're depriving your team of the most critical element of Scrum, the goal, what you want to achieve, what is most valuable this one. You just have a laundry list of items you want to deliver. You don't have to use Scrum for this purpose. There's just no reason why you would work together on these 6, 7, 10, 12, whatever the number is, items here. To me, it looks like, okay, everyone will be vanishing in their cubicles and then only reappear at the end of the sprint, while we actually want to work together as a team. This is the fun part of it. Yeah, what else? Artifact, yeah, product increments. I mean, you build something that will never be delivered for whatever reason. You know, you're somehow in this just churn out mode, and you create stuff and more stuff and more stuff and more stuff, and for whatever reason, you're never delivering it. That could be an issue, I believe, right? You have product increments of with varying product quality levels, you know, because you updated your definition of done several times, but you failed to update your increments as well. You know, so you have it's a bit more tricky to understand what's going on there. Now you don't have one quality level, you have 5 or 6. So that's certainly an issue too. But product backlog and sprint backlog are really the hardcore issues here that we have with anti-patterns, by all means.
Mhm. Yeah, and also what I believe is as you mentioned, that this events or the artifacts or the other elements of the Scrum might be a tool, but the underlining or the core idea is how it is helping us to reflect through the empirical process of those 3 pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation over here. And even if we talk about the artifact, it definitely leads us to one of the core elements or the core aspect of transparency, right? How it is establishing within the process the transparent approach of looking at how we are progressing towards the things, how are we developing something, or how we are letting the customer know that yeah, this is ready for use, and that is how it is giving us an opportunity to get those feedbacks from the customer if we don't
Yes.
if we compromise on those.
Yes.
And since we did talk about the artifacts, and one of the important aspect of Scrum is definitely about the definition of done. How do you think, if most of the common elements or the common factors that one or people ignore while having the definition of done? What are the common anti-patterns around definition of done?
Well, the obvious one, of course, is you don't have one. You know, so, that's the low-hanging fruit to pick. Then that you have a definition of done that's provided by the organization, and you said, yeah, it's fine, okay, put it away, you know, and then you ignore it, or you start creating your own team definition of team-based definition of done, and you do this once and never touch it again. I mean, a good definition of done, of course, is a dynamic commitment, and it changes over time based on your progress. You know, the better you understand the problem and solution space, the more elaborate your definition of done should be. You know, so just to ensure that your increasing understanding of what creates value is reflected in the quality of the product. You know, so not inspecting, adapting your product, your definition of done certainly is an issue that you have by all means. Then we have the cases where you don't do this collaboratively. So someone comes up with the definition of done and everyone else has to swallow it. Not a good idea. Maybe you exclude important people from the discussion that you have. Yes, the developers are responsible for creating one. It doesn't mean that the product owner shouldn't have a say too. And your stakeholders, for example, maybe your product owner is not completely representing the opinion of the stakeholders here. So you won't get it wrong if you invite your stakeholders to that session. I mean, it's not that you have to follow what they say, but it's more about getting an understanding what their opinion on this topic is, because in the end, you create the product for them. You know, you need to understand what they consider to be quality. Quality doesn't mean it has to be the highest level of quality. You know, it's not about Rolls-Roycing everything. You know, this is not the case. You know, in most cases, creating a Toyota is more than sufficient. You know, top quality, excellent quality, price ratio. You know, this is what we strive for, but not beyond. So it's always built to spec, and spec is defined by the definition of done. That's the purpose of it, by all means. So if you have more than one team working on one product, so a multiple teams set up, and they have all different definition of done applied to their work only, and they are not completely overlapping, to a certain extent. Critical too, you should have a smallest common denominator that applies to all the teams, and that should be, in and of itself, be a level of quality where you say, okay, this is okay, this is good enough, but then consider, okay, how can we improve this? There are certainly moments when definition of done is, I wouldn't say disrespected, but somehow not treated seriously by the organization. So, for example, I was once working for a large utility company, and we insourced an application that was mandatory in the UK, and set it up from scratch. And we were very successful about this. We spent less budget and we delivered earlier than expected. So everyone was really happy about this. And of course, there was a bit of time left. We also integrated a completely fully automated continuous delivery mechanism. And that was really fun. And we were proud of this. And we showed it to our UK colleagues. And they said, this looks all great, but you cannot use the continuous delivery practice here. And then, why not? Yeah, governance need to rubber stamp this, so it's really, we're on the safe side here. And I said, okay, do you recall that we all had a meeting and we collaboratively created the definition of done exactly for that purpose? And I said, yeah, but we can't do this. So we ended up in a situation with a perfectly fine setup technology, a decent definition of done, that we had to create a staging system for the governance people, and we deployed everything to the staging system, then notified them, and then they had a week to respond to us whether something would not be meeting their the legal or whatever requirements they had, which never occurred. But nevertheless, they were, taking the fun out of the equation. So that could be another issue within an organization regarding your definition of done. So your team did nothing wrong, but, there are some other issues, let me put it this way.
Oh, how do we handle such situations, right? I mean, you, as rightly mentioned, that since everyone collaboratively decided upon definition of done, and suddenly someone says that, what, we cannot do continuous improvement. So how do we handle such situation?
We accepted it. So,
Okay.
Seriously, I believe you have to choose choose the hill you want to die on carefully, and it wasn't worth the effort, seriously. So everyone on the technology side now knew that the team was really good at what they were doing. So that was important for us, as brand building within the organization as a team. That the UK governance folks insisted on sticking to their old processes. So we said, okay. So you can't have it all at once, right? So it takes more time, and we never managed to overcome that situation. But other people were interested in what we did,
Right. So that's a good, way of looking at things, right? We cannot, or that's the only way I think we could do best in our capacities in that situation, that take one thing at a time or one change at a time, and not try to change everything. So whatever we have in our capacity or in our parameters is what we can do best for that particular situation, right? So obviously, that makes more sense. And speaking about collaboration and teams, right? So what do you think, what are some of the anti-patterns related to team dynamics and collaboration, and how can they be addressed?
Oh, a long list. Let's pick a few of those. So first of all, you have a mixture of different individuals typically within a team. Maybe you have some people who are really silent, more introverted, and other people are more outspoken. And the classic issue that Scrum Master, for example, have if they let it slip. right? If they allow some people to actually dominate the discussions, so two people are basically running all the events, so to speak, because they're outspoken, while all the others are, chipping in and just be silent. That certainly is not a good idea. And as a Scrum Master, you should do something about it, because diversity of thought is typically very helpful in a complex environment, because there are no experts, right? There is no Newton nowadays around, so this won't happen. So we're really interested in the opinion of everyone on the team. Okay, is this the best way to proceed? Are there other ways to proceed? How can we probably help here and there? What are your ideas about the suggested solution? Is that feasible? And so if few people are dominating the discussions all the time, this is not helpful by all means. Another issue that's a bit overlapping, it's affecting team dynamics on the one side, and it's an organizational anti-pattern, I believe, is if you have reporting structures within a team. So a senior developer is the line manager, so to speak, for a junior developer. This is really not helpful. Because rest assured, the junior developer will not talk in retrospectives about won't happen. So
Correct.
this is really a tricky topic. So I had one case where I was basically having the classic team retrospectives, and then I had a one-on-one with the junior, where the junior was basically providing some feedback and comments on what happened during the retrospectives, as far as his superior was concerned, right? And that was really critical information, because his superior, the senior developer, did things that were, I would say, were challenging from a team perspective, right? But of course, I mean, if that individual is deciding how your career goes, would you speak out openly, without knowing what is going to happen in the long run? Okay, it's tricky, of course, because we value psychological safety so much, and all the Scrum values are basically geared towards creating and fostering a situation where psychological safety is created and prevails. But this is the theory, and then there's real life, right? Always a challenge.
Absolutely true, and that's the basic or the very important aspect to it, as you mentioned. If there are maybe a reporting structure, manager working in the same team, and maybe a junior person who is reporting to that manager working in the same team, even if it's not retrospective, even if it's writing lines of code, and this junior person feels that the lines of code written by the manager might not be the best one, but this person might not open up giving that feedback. So again, it's not more of a collaboration, but it's like, I follow what my manager says. I follow what this person who is into the team. I'll do what he is saying. So it's not about collaboration. It's just a kind of following what others are saying.
Yeah,
and also it kills the creativity, right? I mean, the team members or the junior team members will never come up with the creative solutions or creative approaches, right? So it also kills the creativity. And I think this is the most important point that at least as a Scrum Masters, I mean, people who would watch and listen to this episode, I hope that people kind of discourage such reporting structures within the teams. And this is one of the first few things I try to tell the teams, that you know what, you should not be having these line managers in the same team, because it kills the comfortness or comfort zone of the team members in terms of sharing the ideas or coming up with maybe disagreeing to certain things, right? So I think this is a very important point. I think people should understand. Vivek, over to you.
So I have a question on this particular situation, Stefan. I mean, I'm sure it's not it might they're not the perfect fit, or it might someone might differ to it. But even if the organizational structure is such that you will have people, or a manager and a reporting person in the same team, and that might be the structure of the organization. How do we think that this can be, whether do we still need to address this issue or situation, or then we can still have that kind of a structure, but then how it can be avoided that this person gets influenced, or this person is still open to share his or her feedback in any given point of time?
Difficult. Really depends on the culture of the organization. If the organization values communication and exchange of ideas, if they believe that juniors should speak first, they are not biased by the opinion of the seniors, that probably may work to a certain extent. The problem is you never know. You only will learn if it was successful as a conversation scheme after after something might have happened you don't want to happen, and then in hindsight you could say, okay, maybe it wasn't a good idea, but then it's too late. So I fully understand that people are cautious about this. So I don't blame the juniors for not being outspoken. I mean, Scrum values look great on paper, and it's a compelling idea. I really like the concept and put a lot of effort into helping people to get there. But if your livelihood depends on it, probably you have a different perspective on how the things go down. And there's no one to blame for that. I would just try and reach out to the organization and help them understand what conundrum they're creating here, and whether there might be a way to remedy this. So the situation from the team I was talking about earlier was resolved because the senior was promoted to a different position and left the team. So that was the only way. There was no other way to actually solve the issues, because they were so stuck in the traditional HR and budgeting perspective. They couldn't care less about whether there was a reporting structure within the Scrum team. They simply did not care. And I don't know how this just continued to develop. But you can't expect that a traditional organization is just embracing Scrum just because you sent them the Scrum guide as an attachment to an email, right? It won't happen. It takes a long time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm aligned to it, or maybe because this is situational. This is based on what the structure or what the culture of the organization has been, and it cannot be addressing that, no, this is not the right way to do. It's again reflecting on whether it's working or it's helping. Maybe continue. It's not, then look at things what we can do. And since now we are into that way of looking at developers, and one of the key elements of Scrum is about the roles or the accountabilities that Scrum has. We coming down to the developers now, and like, what are some of the anti-patterns that you have seen as a developers they follow, and what are the things that you would say that should be avoided while we are scrumming together?
Well, there are a few, starting with gold plating. It's the idea that you actually put a bit more effort into creating something that was originally agreed upon, and because you got carried away by the moment and you enjoyed the technology so much. Okay, from a human perspective, totally understandable. As a team, of course, you would say, okay, was it a necessary investment, right? Because what a lot of people don't understand is whenever you create a sprint goal, you're also making an investment decision, and this is quite a lot of money that you're spending over the course of the next 1, 2, or 3 weeks, or whatever your sprint length is, right?
Absolutely.
And you should really get professional about making these decisions. And as we mentioned earlier, done always means built to specs. And if specs say Toyota, I know it's more fun to build a Rolls Royce, but then we probably have to stick with Toyota. So that's one part. Of course, we have the other part, cutting corners. Probably because it's pushed from the outside into the team. So someone came up with an arbitrary deadline for something, and the team feels, okay, we can't do this, it's simply not possible unless we cut back on quality here and there. This idea that, my God, no one's looking under the hood, right? Let's shave off a bit here and there, and no one will notice, and we may be delivering the deadline. This, of course, is a slippery slope by all means. First of all, if you start delivering or matching arbitrary deadline, stakeholders will get used to it. Guess what is going to happen? So you will have more of these in the future, right? Because this time it worked well. And secondly, you never know when undone work and sloppy work and work that is not meeting your definition of done is going to bite you in the behind. In my experience, it's not a question of if, it's always a question of when. And most of the time, at least in the cases I observed, it's the most appropriate time. And I mean, it's a moment when you really cannot have it at all, but nevertheless, it somehow happens then, over and over again. Different organizations, different companies, different team sizes, doesn't matter. It's always the same. So these are two very, very common anti-patterns because, I mean, developers are responsible for instilling quality, right? This is one of the critical parts here, right? And I believe they should, walk upright and become professional about this. It's also about saying no. No, we won't do this. No, we can't meet the deadline because then we are compromising our quality here, and we do not see a reason for that. Of course, there are moments when your beliefs are challenged. Imagine you work for a startup and you have runway of maybe 3 months left, and then you're out of funds. And you have to desperately meet a milestone for a next funding round. But that will take 5 months, if you adhere to the definition of done. So if you skip the definition of done and just try to make it happen, have a fighting chance to meet the end of the funds, you probably will be in a position to actually get enough traction that you will get another funding round, Or do you stick to your principles and says, no, we're not going to do this. We intend to die in beauty here. So challenging situation, right? How do you react? And there is no one size fits all answer to this, really.
Correct. Wow. I love the example that you gave about the startup. And I think that's where we as a team must make that decision, right? I mean, keep the things transparent and let everyone decide. I mean, what's right for the entire team or the project or they are working on, right? Whether we need to proceed or whether we need to stop there or whether we need to complete it. So that obviously not a single person's decision, but as you rightly mentioned, at least as developers, we need to be honest that because they are responsible for the quality of the work primarily, so they need to come up with whatever is correct, right? I mean, whatever is the reality of the situation. And yes, I mean, definition of done and quality, these are, I think, core of developers. And I also loved how you talked about Rolls Royce versus the Toyota, right? So that's so amazing. I mean, these are the perspectives I think we need to give to the teams as Scrum Masters. And since we are talking about the accountabilities, another important accountability of Scrum is obviously the Scrum Master. So what I know that you would have so many to list in this for this accountability. So any few maybe unique ones or different which are like difficult to catch hold of, right? So what are some of such anti-patterns according to you?
I think another one on the side of the Scrum Master, for example, would be that how shall I phrase this? That they try to be helpful, support the team, and in doing so, keeping the team dependent. I mean, it's a bit like a soccer parent, if you know what I mean. So if you protect your kids all the time, if you do everything for them, if it's a hotel mama and Uber daddy, nicht? I mean, certainly this is a lot of work that you pour into your children, and I fully understand that you do this out of love for your children and you want the best for them. But you need to let go, right? Age appropriately, of course. If I think back what we did as kids, I mean, people would freak out today, right? So okay, here's your bag with your swimsuit, and now figure out where you go. I mean, we were 9 or 10, and I was living in Hamburg at the time, so almost 2 million inhabitants, a large city, a port city. Port cities always being a bit, a lot of people coming around, so fancy stuff going on. It was totally acceptable that we were, traveling throughout the whole city the whole day without no cell phones, by the way, of course, and that we left in the morning and we came back in the evening from a day in some public bath or something like that. And nowadays you would freak out, 8 hours without any message from your kids. And this is a very similar to Scrum Mastery. I mean, yes, your job is to support your team to help them become successful, right? You're supposed to be a servant leader, but it doesn't mean that you have to do everything for them, right? Sometimes they need to learn how to fail, and it's totally fine. Even if okay, this is not going to work. You've seen it a dozen times before, but it's okay. Let them fail. I mean, as long as no one gets hurt and we're not burning too much money here, and as long as the result is a few bruised egos, okay, I'm fine with that. Let them fail. Or make decisions on behalf of other people who can make the decisions themselves. Never do that. So this restrain from solving, but take it to the team is a really helpful approach for a Scrum Master. And this also implies actively doing nothing. So it's very hard for a lot of people I know to actually do this because they try to be helpful in the best of their intention, but there are unintended consequences. So I like to say a good Scrum Master can take two weeks off. It's not a problem. The team will get by without that individual, right?
Yes, absolutely true. And the last point, I mean, if we believe that without us as a Scrum Master, the team is not going to do, or they're not going to get things done, and then I think that is where the challenge is, and that is where you need to start seeing that how we can fix that problem. If the team is has become dependent on the Scrum Master, then I don't think so we have done anything good to the team while being with the team all their throughout their journey.
Yes, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I mean, say in Scrum, it's relatively simple. As a Scrum Master, our job is to make our team successful. If they are successful, they deserve the spot on the stage in the spotlight, right? That is their place. Enjoy the applause, and you did this. Excellent. While we Scrum Masters are, somewhere offside in the half shadow, and maybe you're talking to yourself, well, not too bad, right? However, if it goes wrong, you should be the first in line to ask yourself, okay, how may I have contributed to what is going on here? Was there something I oversaw? I overheard something where I should have intervened earlier. Was there something that escaped my attention, right? So from that perspective, it's a challenging job because by all means you cannot praise yourself for the success of the team, but by all means you have to accept that you failed your team if they fail. And then please try to figure out what that was and try to avoid this in the future.
Absolutely true. And as one other point, the most important one that you also mentioned is like it's okay to fail at times. I mean, as a Scrum Master, we should not set up the team to ensure that we should be successful each time that we're planning to do something, or we are trying to experiment. It should not be that mindset that we are going to succeed every time. And if we are setting up the team for that, I think indirectly we're setting up them for failure in some aspect.
Yeah, I mean, um, um, a friend once told me that the U.S. Marines have this idea of, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. So failure is an integral part of how we learn. I mean, remember how you learned as a kid.
Absolutely.
I mean, the first bicycle lessons, you probably fell off, and then you got back up, and then you
Correct.
tried again, and all the time, and you do so as long as you're motivated, and because you want to actually tackle the bicycle, right? And you want to learn how this works. And this is the way that humans learn. We're good at this, learning this way. So depriving your team from that opportunity is actually not a good idea, right?
Absolutely true, absolutely. And the other one important thing that we wanted to bring up at this point of time is about the support, or maybe what we can talk about it at the organization level, or maybe the middle management, and that the team interact or keep on discussing with, or having conversations with. What are some of the anti-patterns that you see while the managers around or the delivery leads around? What are few of the anti-patterns that can be avoided?
Typical anti-patterns are, this behavior, my budget, my feature. Don't tell me that you're trying to solve my customers' problems. I know exactly what they need, and otherwise I'm paying for your team. So you will do what I tell you to do. Arbitrary deadline. This classic idea from the industrial age that you need to keep your workers on the tiptoes, because otherwise they're slacking. Insisting that the outcome increases over time. I was trying to explain, dude, we're not assembling fridges here, where a functional fridge represents value. Just because we add a bit more code, it doesn't mean it's valuable. Maybe it's the opposite. We don't know. It's a complex environment here. So not including the teams in actually making important decisions product-wise. So product owner is just a glorified secretary, so to speak, communicating what other people decided outside the team. This is by all means not helpful. Of course, there's a lot of critical issues on the tools and infrastructure side, so not letting teams decide what tools work best for them, not giving them the right infrastructure, like rooms or tools to work with. What else do we have? Insisting on joining events that are not supposed to be joined unless they invite you. So someone wants to desperately participate in daily scrums, because they want to learn how far their feature is or whatnot, or the same with retrospectives. So there's a lot of things, a lot of these anti-patterns from the stakeholder or organizational level have their origin in the classic management approach from the industrial age. So this idea of Taylorism, there's a management level that analyzes and is creative and designs systems and procedures, and then there are the workers that are more or less cogs in the machinery, and they are replaceable because there are other cogs that would like to be part of the machinery queuing outside the factory gate, right? Of course, this is nowadays a different situation. I mean, if you're in machine learning, if you're building models, for example, try to find the engineers who are experienced in model building, queuing outside your factory gate. They will probably be hanging out in front of Google or Facebook or Amazon or whatever you like to have here, right? So life has changed. It has drastically changed, and at least in our environment, creating problems to solve complex adaptive problems um, the management is sometimes lacking that understanding. Okay, there might be reason for that. Maybe they're very much invested in the current structure. Maybe they have accumulated a lot of career equity over time, and maybe they have personal agendas. Maybe they don't want to entrust the family's well-being to a bunch of hoodie-wearing nerds promising to deliver something, that they have to to sell to their superiors too, right? It's all understandable, but it's not a reason not to work on them.
Wow, all valid points. So many things. I could relate it. Different projects or different stages of my career. I could literally visualize people. Who were
Mhm.
such. Who reflected such things. So, if I have to talk in detail about that, it would take another podcast to maybe cover just this topic about the anti-patterns of the stakeholders within the organization.
Mhm.
So not holding much or not holding you more. Just the last question is how does your book, The Anti-Pattern Guide, uh, relate to scaling Scrum for large organizations? Address anti-patterns to scaling Scrum at the large organization.
Not specifically. The topic is certainly spread out through the book in several of the anti-patterns, but I did not curate it into a different chapter or something like that. So the structure of the book is really roles or accountabilities, events, stakeholders. Yeah, that's a chapter. You may find a lot of those scaling issues in the stakeholder chapter. Developers, then the events, then the artifacts and the commitments. But it's not particularly pointing to scaling issues, scaling anti-patterns within organization, which would be a very interesting topic indeed, having a look at those. How would that manifest itself? What can we observe? How are people undermining their own efforts? What are the low-hanging fruits, or what are the more problematic issues that we have here? Yeah, could be a nice topic. Absolutely.
Definitely, that would be a good read too if you come up with that book as well. And thank you so much, Stephen, for your time. And it's wonderful talking to you about your book. And spending 7 years on this is almost like someone's career, right? It's a mid manager's career in itself. So thank you so much for your time and in spending this long time in writing a book. And I'm sure about the quality that it would bring. And it's an interesting it would be an interesting read because of the topic that it is, and I am sure that many people would love reading that. And the point that you mentioned about your book, right, that it's not kind of a checklist, it's just a tool wherein it will enable people to have a conversation around such
Mhm.
anti patterns and figure out together what how can we resolve this, or how what can be done to address these anti patterns, is something that stood out for me. So I'm definitely going to read your book. Thank you so much for your time, Stephen. This conversation itself is kind of a training for people who are implementing Scrum or who are using Scrum in their projects or in the organizations. So I'm sure that people would learn something from this podcast. So thank you so much for your time and coming over and doing this for us, Stephen.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.